This is Dan Ray, the host of NightSide. I hope you enjoy listening to the NightSide podcasts here at the NightSide website, and I invite you to join us every Monday through Friday night from 8 to midnight for NightSide on WBZ News Radio 1030. This is going to be a very good hour of radio as well. I'm delighted to welcome to the program, I believe for the first time, a journalist himself, Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, how are you tonight?
Hey, it's great to be on the show.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. You are a Dartmouth graduate, as I understand it.
I certainly am. I'm very proud of it, and became a little bit of a rebel conservative in my undergraduate days. I'm a young Reaganite in the 1980s, and I've been causing trouble ever since.
Well, I guess your critics would say that is absolutely true. There was a very active group of young conservatives. I'm not sure when Laura Ingraham was at Dartmouth. Was she a contemporary of yours?
Well, yes, our little band was called the Dartmouth Review, and
yes.
we were a thorn in the side of the university administration. So that's how we cut our teeth politically, and it's remarkable to see we're a whole generation from there. And looking back on those Reagan days and looking forward to, boy, what's happened to the country, quite a change.
Well, you were born in India, and you came here as an exchange student back in the day. And you eventually ended up as a policy analyst in the Reagan White House. So coming here as an exchange student and finishing, I guess, the latter years of the Reagan White House, that was quite an ascension from someone coming in as a college student from another country. It was, many people would describe it as meteoric.
Well, I was very lucky. Reagan brought in a lot of young people. I was actually in my 20s in those days. And, I came to America. I had $500 in my pocket. I mean, I couldn't even afford to eat at McDonald's. It was too expensive. So I've seen in my life the realization of the American dream. My conservative and Republican politics are based on that. I believe ultimately we need to create ladders of opportunity in this country for people to climb up. And those ladders, that American dream, I see as a little imperiled right now.
There are many of us who agree with that perspective. Now, you ran into some problems, and I want to get those problems out of the way before we start to talk about your project. You ended up actually spending some time in jail.
Well, I spent 8 months in a federal confinement center in overnight confinement. I was out in the day. I was locked up at night. And I spent this time with some pretty seasoned hoodlums. Now, this was for the crime of exceeding the campaign finance laws. I gave $20,000 to a college friend of mine from Dartmouth who was running for the U.S. Senate. I had no corrupt motive. The candidate didn't even know about it. And quite frankly, no American has gone to prison or been locked up for doing what I did. So I believe I was selectively targeted. This is part of the vendetta of the Obama administration. I'd made a movie called 2016 Obama's America 4 years ago, and it really ticked off Obama. And I know that because he was railing against me on his website, BarackObama.com, and then a few weeks later, the FBI came knocking on my door.
That should not happen in any country, especially in America, Dinesh. And I asked you that because I wanted to get that issue out of the way if anyone wanted to belabor the point as we move along. But you have made another movie, and I've had some of my listeners tell me they've watched it and they have enjoyed it. Tell us about the latest movie. It's called Hillary's America. Did we just lose Dinesh?
No, I'm here.
Yes.
The latest movie, Hillary's America, and an accompanying book of the same title. These are exposés not just of the Clintons, but of the whole progressive movement and of the Democratic Party. In this movie, I take on the sort of central moral claim of the Democratic Party to rule. And that claim is that the Democratic Party is the party of the little guy, of the ordinary guy. The Democrats have always been fighting for Latinos, for immigrants, for women. They've been at the forefront of fighting for blacks, for emancipation and civil rights. Now, I show in this film that this whole story is a big fable. It's a big lie. In fact, the Democratic Party has not only been implicated in, it's been the perpetrator of the worst and most vilest crimes of American history. The Democratic Party was the party of Indian relocation and the Trail of Tears. It was the party that was forthright in defense of slavery. It was the party of segregation and Jim Crow. All the segregation laws in the country were passed by Democrats. It was the party of the Ku Klux Klan and lynching, and the Klan was the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party for 30 years. It was the party that opposed women's suffrage, fighting it in Congress where the Democrats lost, then they fought it in the states where they lost again. It was the party of sympathy for fascism in the 1930s. The Democrats are the ones who interned Japanese Americans after World War II. So this is an unbelievably sick, demented history of exploitation, subjugation, and theft. And so the Clintons, I show, are just sort of the latest gangsters who have been running, in a sense, this kind of horrible tradition. But it's a tradition most people don't know about. The Democrats have beautifully camouflaged it, in a sense, by altering the history books. They have taken the crimes of the Democratic Party and blamed them on the South, or blamed them on America, or blamed them on the Republicans. But no, it wasn't the South. It was the Democrats who did all this stuff, and they ought to take some responsibility for it.
My guest is Dinesh D'Souza. We're going to continue our conversation, and I'm going to challenge what he said. We're going to talk a little bit about how maybe the country changed in an election or two in the 1960s, and how the Democratic Party, which in the 1960s, I think, began to pivot. And we'll go back and forth on this for sure, and I suspect that he will probably have the better part of the argument. But Dinesh, I know that you will respect the questions that I will ask, and we'll also invite the audience. Also, Dinesh, there's a website where if folks are interested in seeing this movie, which makes many accurate historical points, there's no question about the accuracy of many of the historical points that this movie makes, and historical points that people don't know. What is the website that folks, it's now being shown in about 1,000 theaters nationwide. I know a couple of my callers the other night told me it was a great movie to watch.
Yeah, the website is Hillary'sAmericaTheMovie.com. Hillary'sAmericaTheMovie.com. You can watch a trailer, you can plug in your zip code, and it'll tell you where the movie is playing near you. I should say it's the top documentary of this year, even though it's only been out 2.5 weeks. It's also in the top 10 political documentaries of all time, again, in such a short time. So very excited about the movie. People love it. They usually stand up and applaud at the end of the movie. We're very highly rated on the critical sites like Rotten Tomatoes. The audience reaction is well over 80%. So, yes, this is a movie I'd urge people to see. They're going to love it. We're going
to back to our conversation. If you're on the line, stay there. We will get to you. I promise. 617-254-1030, 888-WBZ-1030. And I think we're going to have some interesting questions and answers coming right up in this next segment.
I like you, Danny.
We're going to say a few things, and then you'll say a few things, and then we'll be done.
I got Dan. I got talk.
Dan Ray, NightSide, WBZ News Radio 1030.
My guest is, I call him a conservative intellectual, and he fits the bill, no doubt about that. Dinesh D'Souza, he's a filmmaker. He believes in what he's doing, and he believes in his cause. And the premise of Hillary's America, the movie, is that many people don't understand the tradition of the Democratic Party and perhaps the tradition of the Republican Party. And I think that factually you're absolutely correct, Dinesh. But I'd like to talk a little bit about two elections that I think are important. Three elections are important. Those are the elections of the 1960s. I think most people don't realize that when John Kennedy won the White House in 1960, he carried states like Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Richard Nixon carried places like Vermont and California, Oregon, in Washington, and of course in '64, Barry Goldwater only carried, I believe, 4 states in the Deep South, and then Richard Nixon went with what was called, the Republicans back then, the Southern Strategy. And I think the Electoral College map changed dramatically during those 3 elections. Am I right or wrong on that?
Well, you're right about it, but I think the implication of what you're saying is wrong, and here's what I mean. Remember, there was another candidate running in '68, and that was George Wallace.
Sure,
George
absolutely,
Wallace ran as an independent. He was earlier a segregationist. Remember, he was segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever.
I think he was a segregationist when he ran in '68.
Yes, he was. And so the Southern strategy, there was a Southern strategy, but it's not what people think. George Wallace carried the Deep South. Now, Nixon's advisors came to him and said to him the following. They said, look, the South has been becoming dramatically less racist through the 20th century. You can never win by appealing to the racist vote, because if you appeal to the racist vote, you might win places like Mississippi, but you lose the entire Northeast, your traditional base. So you have to appeal to the non-racist voters in the South who are patriotic, who are Christian, and who will benefit from the Republican Party's message of ladders of opportunity. So what Nixon did is he made a non-racist appeal to the South, and he began to pick off the upper South. And that's what happened in the 68 election. So people think that somehow the racists kind of all went to the Republican Party, but it's not true. The racists stayed in the Democratic Party. They went for Wallace. And the non-racist South went for Nixon.
Well, of course, in '64, Goldwater, who was a states' rights guy, and I do not believe Barry Goldwater was a racist, the only states Goldwater won were, I believe, Alabama, Mississippi, perhaps Georgia, South Carolina. He only had 4. And I'm trying to pull up the '64 map right now. Goldwater.
Here's the thing about Goldwater, if I can say so. Goldwater was head of the local NAACP in Arizona. He was very much of a civil rights guy, but he was also a constitutionalist, and he had a technical objection to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because he thought it should outlaw public discrimination, but it also outlawed private discrimination. So anyway, Goldwater said, I'm against it. But Goldwater was not typical of the Republicans, because if you pull up the vote, and you can do this as we talk, more Republicans proportionally voted for the Civil Rights Act of ⁸ and the Voting Rights Act of '65 and the Fair Housing Bill of '68 than Democrats did.
No, I get you on that. And by the way, Goldwater did carry Arizona, but he carried Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. And that, of course, was an interesting election. So here's my question. Here's my question. There have been Republicans, and I think of Jack Kemp, who I knew very well, who always was willing to seek out minority votes. But I think the Republican Party for many, many years has ignored minority voters. They have not taken their story to minority communities. And as a matter of fact, if you look at how minorities have done in America in the last 7 years, unemployment is now worse amongst black youth than it was in 2008 when Barack Obama, or 2009 when he became president. Why has the Republican Party not been able? And we have guests on this program all the time from Project 21. We have Alan West and David Webb and many folks. We do not compartmentalize, but why has the Republican Party not done better and not sought minority votes more effectively in the last several elections?
I think the main reason is the following. If you really look and see why blacks defected from the Republican Party, which was their natural home since emancipation, to the Democratic Party, blacks really began that move not in the 1960s. They began to move in droves in the 1930s. Now, why did that happen? It basically happened because of the promises and some of the economic benefits of the New Deal. Remember, blacks were in terrible shape. It was the Great Depression. And many blacks moved over very reluctantly because they knew they were leaving the party of Lincoln and joining the party of segregation and the Ku Klux Klan. But they did it anyway. So I think what's happened with Republicans since then is Republicans think, look, essentially what's going on is the Democrats are buying black votes by kind of engaging in this huge public auction. We'll give you free stuff. We'll give you housing. We'll give you food stamps. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. And we Republicans can't compete in this kind of Santa Claus contest that the Democrats have set up. Now, I think that's actually a mistake. Republicans can compete for black votes, particularly because of what you say, which is what the Democrats have really ended up doing, is building what I call the urban plantation. They've created these plantations in the inner city, which have many of the features of the old rural slave plantations, except the new plantations aren't just for blacks. They're also ghettos and barrios and slums and reservations for the Native Americans. So I think Republicans need to show moral outrage about this and show that life in these places is terrible. We've thrown trillions of dollars to remedy these problems, but many of these places, inner city, Oakland, Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, they're about as bad off as they were in 1968. Nobody ever seems to get out of there. So, yes, Republicans have a powerful moral case to make if only they would make it.
And the Republican standard bearer, Donald Trump, seems to be more interested, in my opinion, tweeting and getting involved in peripheral, tangential arguments as opposed to taking. I thought he had the potential to take that story across the country, and that is what most disappoints me about Donald Trump.
Well, I have to say that Trump can sometimes be reckless. He can sometimes be insensitive. I don't think he's a racist. I mean,
I don't think he is either. But I think he's missing an opportunity, as I think this election had the potential to realign the electoral college map as dramatically as, let's say, the 68 election realigned the electoral college map, and as, by the way, the 1960 election did. Because remember, Dwight Eisenhower won two overwhelming elections in the 1950s against Adlai Stevenson, where the only states Stevenson carried were the states in the Deep South, the same states that Goldwater carried in 64.
That's very interesting and accurate. And yes, I agree with this. I also think this movie can help Trump a lot, because the attack on Trump is you're a bigot, you're a xenophobe, you're a fascist. And what we do is we take these terms seriously. It's not a matter of, hey, if you cross your arms and look to the left, that makes you Mussolini. Fascism actually was a real movement with real people. And so we say, which is the party that actually enslaved people and segregated them and brutalized them and hung them and lynched them? And so white supremacy is a real thing. It's not just a rhetorical balloon that you send up every now and then. So I think this is a movie, if Trump saw it, I think he would go nuts, and he would see the power of the movie to be able to turn the tables and show that the party of bigotry not only was the Democratic Party, but hey, if you peek at these DNC leaked emails, you see that they haven't changed all that much. I mean, they've changed in their public presentation. You might say that the donkey has put on a new dress, but underneath it's the same old jackass.
And by the way, just to go back to the 56 election, which was when Eisenhower defeated Stevenson, Stevenson carried Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. 7 states, most of which were in the Deep South. My guest is Dinesh D'Souza. We're going to go to phone calls, 617-254-1030, 888-929-1030. The movie, Hillary's America, themovie.com. You can go to that website and you can put in your zip code and you can find a theater near you. I assume people can also watch it somehow through, I'm guessing, Dinesh, through Netflix or somehow. Is there a way to see it?
Not now.
Not now, okay.
The way this stuff works is that you make a contract to be in the theater for 90 days. And then in October, the movie will come out in DVD and home box office. So there will be a time. But don't wait for that. Go see the movie in the theater, because it's a totally different experience. Absolutely.
We'll be back with my guest, Dinesh D'Souza, and your phone calls on NightSide, 617-254-1030, 888-929-1030.
Radio.com. Radio.com.
Danny?
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
Are you listening to me?
We're doing the NightSide Shuffle.
NightSide with Dan Ray.
We're doing the NightSide Shuffle.
On the radio.
WBZ.
All night long.
News Radio 1030.
Dinesh D'Souza is my guest. Let's go to phone calls. Going to start it off with Costa in Dedham. Costa, how are you tonight?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Good. You're on my guest, Dinesh D'Souza. Go right ahead.
Excellent. First of all, it's great to talk to you, Dinesh. I've always wanted to meet you in person, but this will do. I brought my parents and my brother to see America, Imagine the World Without Her, and I thought that was phenomenal. And then I just this past weekend saw Hillary's America, and my only critique would be that I didn't think you gave it to Hillary hard enough, to be honest.
I think that's probably the first time Dinesh has ever had that critique. Go ahead, Dinesh.
Well, I have to say, I present Hillary differently than Obama. 4 years ago, I made the movie on Obama. And with Obama, I think at the end of the day, he's an ideologue. Now, I don't agree with his ideology. I think it's a little pathetic. It's twisted. It's destructive. But he believes it. And that's what he thinks he's doing better for America. With Hillary and Bill, I think you're dealing a little bit more, to be honest, with like Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, these are basically people on the make on the take. They've been sort of running rackets since the old Arkansas days, continuing in the White House when Hillary was Secretary of State. So I think with Hillary, we're basically dealing with someone who puts herself first and American foreign policy and domestic policy to a second place.
Right, right.
I would agree with you, by the way, on things like TPP. Hillary wakes up, reads the polls, and she decides what her position is.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
not
but
just
at
she
the same
reads the
time,
polls.
media
I mean, it isn't a matter of reading the polls. With Hillary, it's much more sordid than that. I mean, basically, a foreign entity or a foreign donor decides they want something. For example, a really good example would be a change of policy on supporting India's nuclear policy. Hillary was opposed to it. And then Bill goes to India, he gives a bunch of speeches, he gets exaggerated fees, which are kind of a down payment. Then Hillary switches her position on the India nuclear policy, and then millions of dollars flow into the Clinton Foundation. I mean, this pattern can be seen again and again and again and again. So I think it's more a matter of almost putting up policy to the highest bidder. I mean, look, we can argue about it, but at the end of the day, Hillary has gone from $0 to $300 million on a government salary. So is there even a plausible way to imagine how that could legitimately happen?
Well, you cattle futures.
That's
a joke. That's a joke, Dinesh. Trust me. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if I could say one more thing about the film, first of all, everybody can go see it over at Patriot Place. And that's probably the closest theater, at least, to the 128 belt. But one more knock on the movie, Dinesh. The actress he used to play a young Hillary was far too attractive, I thought, to be realistic. So there we go.
Well, this is
I told you, Dinesh, there'd be some criticism.
Well, I can tell that this is a woman after his own heart. Look, I didn't want to go after Hillary by basically making her look hideous and so on. So we picked an actress that I think actually did have a pretty good imitation of Hillary's cackling laugh. And I wanted to show the early years where Hillary was essentially moved from a Goldwater Republican to a Hillary Democrat by Alinsky. And that's the scene that we show in the movie.
Right, right. Well, it was well
what
done.
difference at this point does it make?
Thanks, Costa.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the call. 617-254-1030, 888 WBZ 1030. Let's jump in here. We're going to get Jim in Newburyport in before we go to break. Jim, how are you?
Oh, very well. Mr. D'Souza, I'm thrilled to speak to you. I'm a frequent caller to the show, and I've been urging people for years to view your work. Not just the movies. You can go online and see your debate with Bill Ayers at Dartmouth and your lecture at Amherst College. People who want to argue with you, they can't refute the facts. They can try and refute your conclusions, but you have to suspend logic to do it. And I'm just so thrilled. Thank you for the work that you do.
Hey, I appreciate it so much. That's so generous of you. I will say that I make startling claims in the movie. I point out, for example, that in 1860, the year of the Civil War, no Republicans owned a slave. All the slaves in the entire country were owned by Democrats. Now, even actors, the black actors that we hired for the movie went nuts when they saw this. They're like, Dinesh, is this really true? And the reason I wrote the book, Hillary's America, is the book has chapter and verse. It substantiates the claims in the movie, and it has a lot of stuff that's actually not in the movie, but supports it.
Well, usually I call it the debate contest, but I'm just going to thank you, and I'm going to mention that the government has tried to mute you the same way they did with James Rosen, my friend. In the news break, you can hear David Chalian with CNN speak, and he's the guy who worked for the PBS NewsHour who got fired from Yahoo after making, remarks at the Republican convention on an open mic 4 years ago about how the Republicans are having a party and while black people are drowning. And, we need to hear your voice. We need to hear the voices that will argue the facts, display the facts. And I want to thank you again for the work you do. And Dan, you
I appreciate that.
All right,
thank you very much.
Appreciate the call. Have a great night, Jim.
Thank you.
617-254-1030, 888 WBZ 1030. Very quick break. Come right back with Dinesh D'Souza.
All afternoon, 3 until 8.
Governor Baker signs the landmark pay equity bill,
Diane Stern.
which demands that women get comparable pay for doing the same job as men.
Jeff Brown.
The head of the MBTA's biggest union tells the Fiscal Control Board that money room reforms aren't working.
All afternoon, 3 until 8.
U.S. military efforts against ISIS have expanded to include suspected ISIS fighters in Libya.
Military support is limited to these airstrikes.
The Newswatch never stops.
WBZ News Radio 1030.
I want you to speak freely.
If you only knew the power of NightSide.
I wanna listen to NightSide.
And the only way to convey is by your talk.
Till the night closes in.
NightSide with Dan Ray.
Till the night closes in.
WBZ News Radio 1030.
Back to the phones we go for Dinesh D'Souza, his book, Hillary's America, the Movie. You can go to Hillary'sAmericaTheMovie.com. I'm assuming that's all one word, Dinesh, correct?
It's all one word, no apostrophe.
No, Hillary'sAmericaTheMovie.com, and you can enter your zip code and find out. And by the way, we're heard, Dinesh, in about 38 states, so hopefully there's a lot of zip codes that will be entered tonight as a consequence of this interview. Let's go to John in Boston. John, you are next on NightSide with Dinesh D'Souza.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Dinesh. It's great talking with you. I've seen your movie twice, Dinesh, down in Kingston, Mass. It's just an amazing movie. I can see why the Democrats are afraid of people seeing this movie, because you expose the exploitation of black people, and a great injustice has been done to you, Dinesh. I think of like the Reverend Al Sharpton over millions of dollars, and then putting you in jail is totally an injustice to you. I hope that will be rectified. But the movie, I challenge anybody who's intellectually honest to take notes and go see that movie and make up your own mind. Take notes on the truth and the history of what Dinesh is what that movie is about. It's just amazing. The exploitation of the people in Haiti. I encourage young people especially, and black people. A lot of people don't know. A lot of black people don't know about movie Dinesh. I talk to many blacks and explain to them to try and encourage them to go see the movie. Your movie is just an amazing movie in the history of this country. And I just want to thank you so much. You are an American hero for doing that movie.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of the information in the movie I didn't know myself until I really began to dig into it and research it. For example, there was such a close affinity between the Democrats and fascism in the 1930s. To give you a couple of tidbits, young JFK went to Nazi Germany in the 1930s, and he came back effusive with praise of Hitler. FDR admired Mussolini, and it was kind of a mutual admiration society. Mussolini reviews FDR's book in an Italian magazine, and he goes, "This guy's one of us. He's great. He's a fascist." Now, after World War II, all of this became super embarrassing, and so progressive historians said, gee, we don't really want to see this in the textbooks. We don't want young people to know about it. So part of what I'm doing in this movie is bringing out a hidden truth that will help us, I think, to understand our country better and think more clearly about our future.
Dinesh, let me jump in on the John Kennedy thing. I'm a bit of a student of history and a bit of a student of John Kennedy. I think that John Kennedy, if he was alive today, would be a Republican. John Kennedy, as you know, was born in 1917. He did spend some time in Germany. He actually had a girlfriend in Germany who was obviously a native of Germany. But I've never seen anything where Kennedy came back effusively in praise of Adolf Hitler. Now, I know that his dad was the ambassador to England, and he lost his position as ambassador to England, I believe, because he was an advocate of us staying out of World War II. But I'd never heard any comments like that about John Kennedy, of course, and I think it's important to mention that he went on to serve in World War II. He lost a brother, Joe Kennedy, in World War II, and he himself was badly hurt and was a hero during World War II. And I just want to get your comments on that.
Yeah, no, this is very valuable because you're right. I mentioned it was young JFK because certainly JFK changed later. The reason I mentioned the example is because it shows that the 1930s were a time, remember, even at that time, Nazism wasn't associated with the Holocaust. All of that came out much later. But here's my point. there were JFK's diaries that talk about this were released in the last few years. So do me a favor, and as we talk, just Google JFK 1930s Nazi Germany, and it'll pull up articles that you can read as we speak that will show you that what I just said about JFK is absolutely true and is in fact now uncontested by historians.
All right, I will do that. We're coming up on a break. John, do you have a final comment?
Just wanted to say also the fact that you brought the whole point of what Saul Alinsky was involved with, Dinesh, and the influence he's had on this country is just astounding. He did such a great job, and I really just want to thank you. It's just an amazing movie. I really encourage young people and black people to especially see that movie and see the exploitation that's taken place.
Well, the remarkable thing with Alinsky, I believe, is that he was a mentor not only to Obama. Now, Obama didn't know him personally, but Obama studied under the Alinskyites. Hillary knew Alinsky. She met him in high school, wrote her thesis on him in college, maintained a relationship with him that lasted many, many years. So there's the idea that this guy Alinsky, who was kind of a thief and a gangster, actually boasted about his association with the Capone mob. But the idea that this guy would be the tutor of the current president and the aspiring next president. It's very interesting, to say the least.
Appreciate your call, John. Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you. Good night. 617-254-1030, 888-WBZ-1030. Let me open up the BZ box office for the first time. First time tonight, if you are caller number 9 at 617-931-1030, you'll win a pair of tickets to the spectacular musical classic Singing in the Rain at Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater, now from August 16th through September 4th. So you do have time for schedules and showtimes. Visit nsmt.org. Ninth caller, 617-931-1030. We are back with more with Dinesh D'Souza right after this.
Why don't you talk? Do it.
NightSide with Dan Ray.
Well, what's it to talk about?
Call 617-254-1030 or 888-929-1030. WBZ News Radio 1030.
My guest is Dinesh D'Souza. And Dinesh, I did Google what you asked me to Google during the break, and there certainly are some stories. Most of the stories and the reviews of the diaries, and I have not read the diaries myself, I hope you have, seem to come out of European papers, and a lot of the European papers that tend to deal with what you and I probably would characterize as sort of scandalous approach. And do I think the things that John Kennedy, then 20 years old or 21 years old, might have written would be somewhat different to what a John Kennedy 5 years or 10 years later would have felt? I suspect his views probably changed dramatically. I think the musings of any 17, 18, or 19-year-old probably no one would want their musings in many respects presented to the world. Go ahead, Dinesh.
Look, and we agree with all this. I mean, my purpose in mentioning this was simply the fact that in the 1930s, fascism presented itself as progressive, just as communism did. And
it was the National Socialist. It was the National Socialist Party. That's what Nazi stands for.
Exactly. And so you essentially had three progressive movements: one in Russia, one in Germany, and one in the United States. And for observers at the time, there was an affinity between them. These weren't seen as opposites. Later, with the war, it all changed. So anyway, I don't want to dwell on this.
No, absolutely. And there were other isolationists like Charles Lindbergh, the great American aviator, and others during the there were Nazi Bund meetings in America in the 1930s.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go to Russ. Russ is in Boston. Russ, next with Dinesh D'Souza on NightSide. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Dan and Dinesh. Dinesh, truthfully, you are a patriotic American, and I cannot thank you enough for the great work that you do. Your movie is a must-see. It was brilliantly put together. And nothing more that I enjoyed, and I really, really admired your work. When you were incarcerated with that lifelong scammer, and you're sitting at the table, and over the movie, you're comparing their scams with the scams of politics. And I'll tell you, what a great marriage you put between both of them. And you don't know how much I enjoyed the movie. And I'll tell you, when it was over, I hollered in the theater, "Remember this in November."
And you've got a lot of fans tonight, Dinesh. Rush.
Oh my gosh! Well, I'm so overwhelmed, and believe me, as someone who I was a book writer for many years, and the reason I went to making movies was not only to reach a wider audience, but also because movies reach the head and the heart. They can transform you a little bit on the inside in 90 minutes, and so just to hear people who have seen the ideas in the movie, but also the feeling and the emotion of the movie. I'm told that in theaters around the country, at the end of the movie, the whole audience stands up and applauds. And that's so rare in a movie today that I feel just humbled and overwhelmed to hear that.
Dinesh, God bless you, and may you live to be over 100, continuing writing books and putting movies out there.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate the call. Let's keep it rolling here. We got Steve in Lowell up next. Steve, welcome. Next on Nightside with Dinesh D'Souza. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Dan. Hi, Dinesh. Good show as always. Dinesh, I'm interested to know what your impression is of the most recent WikiLeaks revelations, not the ones whereby the resignation of Debbie Wasserman Schultz were resulted, but the most recent ones that show primary source information that Hillary Clinton was responsible for the arming of ISIS.
Now, this I think is very interesting. I think it's premature for me to draw any conclusions, but I will say this, that the Clintons, in my experience, and we show this in the movie, are always on the make. Everywhere they go, they're looking to feather their nest. And so I wondered for a while about Benghazi. Why did she miss that 3 a.m. phone call? It can't be because she was merely negligent or careless. Hillary is actually a very smart woman, and she's been in public life all her life. So she had to be doing something else. And so what I find fascinating is this idea that sort of you can think of the Clintons as robbing Fort Knox, and then people come running in and they go, this guy needs medical attention, that guy's in trouble, and the Clintons are irritated. They're like, leave us alone, we're robbing Fort Knox. And that was the tone of Hillary's, when she basically said, what difference does it make? She sounded annoyed that people were even asking her about it. And I figured that the Clintons were up to something else. And so the WikiLeaks might point to what that something else was.
It seems to me that what WikiLeaks is pointing to, and again, this is primary source info, and nobody brings up any contention about the authenticity of the emails that Julian Assange has indexed. What it seems to indicate is that she used Benghazi as a launching pad for U.S. policy in Syria, which was to arm ISIS to overthrow the government, which is a sovereign government of Bashar Assad. Whatever you might think about Bashar Assad is beside the point. It's a sovereign government that the United States decided to overthrow once again by arming a militant Islamic group. And that seemed to be U.S. policy, which was carried out by Hillary Clinton when she served as Secretary of State.
All right, fair enough, Steve. I got full line, Steve. I'd love to get to as many callers as I can. Okay.
Of course you do.
Thank you very much. Good night, Fred in Beverly. Fred in Beverly, you're next on Nightside with Dinesh D'Souza. Go right ahead.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm interested. Even though many of the things that you did mention tonight, I did know or have an inkling of, because unlike most people, I like to be informed. Most people seem to not even want to know any of this stuff. But one of the things I wanted to mention was what really bothers me, and I'd love to see you or someone else do a documentary about, is about when the news media stopped telling the news and when they became just something that gives out propaganda and tries to influence people's opinions as opposed to actually telling the truth. And that's why people don't know anything, is because they're told what people want them to know. And the other thing I was going to mention is...
So let's get a question in there quick, okay, Fred, because I want to get one more call in.
All right. Well, I'm just wondering if you would ever do a documentary about something like that, or about Monsanto and the influence that they seem to have on the food industry in this country.
Dinesh, can I get a quick answer? I want to get one more call in.
Just a very quick comment on the media. I mean, I do think that there is a kind of shameless bias. I'm not saying there's anything such as pure objectivity, but at least the attempt to be fair. Look at the small example of our movie. We've got the #1 political film in the country right now, but if you were to watch any of the networks, or NPR, or MSNBC, or CNN, you wouldn't know that this movie even exists, and that's because they don't want it to exist.
All right, fair enough. Appreciate your call, Fred. Thank you. Let me go to Angela in North Carolina. Angela, next, and maybe the last call. You got to be quick. You're on with Dinesh D'Souza. Go right ahead.
I always have to be quick. How you doing this evening?
We're doing great, Angela, but we are coming up against the
news. I brought up this point to you before about the similarities between Trump and Obama, and basically I heard that tonight, and I have not read your book. And I want to ask the question as the last call about the media, as far as when the media goes over the officials on policies and rules that have already been stated and finalized, how does the media have the power to go over intelligence, and why do they let them?
I'm not sure quite I understand what you're asking, Angela. How
meaning that as a public official come out and say, well, this is our findings, this and this and that, and that's the policy and that's it, and we've got this judgment. But then the media goes over and challenges that and make it a big thing without the actual policies of what they're saying.
Well, the media's job is to always question and challenge, and I think in the last few years they probably haven't done enough
but on an
of
intelligent level, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On
Okay.
an intelligent level, it should be a balance.
Angela, I appreciate that. You happen to just come up as the last call of the hour, so I got to scoot. We'll have you on again, okay? I promise.
Okay.
Thank you. Dinesh D'Souza, thank you very much for a great hour. Hillary's America, the movie.com. The phone lines, we could have done 2 hours, Dinesh. So this is a Boston-based station, but as you can tell, we get around the country. Please, thank you. Come back and stay there. I'd like to thank you off air privately if you don't mind, okay?
I'd like that. I've enjoyed it very much, and thank you.
You're welcome.